If an antiquarian were to be granted one wish, it would surely be time travel. It's the only surefire way to answer all those pesky questions that cause us so much confusion in our minds. And you know, I really can't stand the confusion in my mind. Questions like, how do you build a hill fort? Well, this week we're going to answer that question, and without resorting to using my risky time bangle. Welcome to Ladle Hill, or Mirrors Birria in old money. An actual unfinished Iron Age hill fort preserved in aspic. And as well as showing you how to build an Iron Age hill fort, we're going to speculate wildly about why they didn't finish the job. We are in the Hampshire Highlands, and I thought it would be a good idea to have some local Wessex expertise, but unfortunately, allotment fox wasn't available, so we've got Hedley Thorne from Wessex Ways. Although, are you sure it's not the Michelin Man?
All right. Geography teacher.
It's going to be one of those shoots.
Right, as well as the unfinished hill fort, there are a lot of other ancient features up here that we need to first understand. Let's unpack those.
Ladle Hill Fort is located on this impressive escarpment with tracks running up the steep northern side, and then this one that runs along the ridgeway at the top. It's nowadays called the Wayfarer's Walk, and Hedley's going to tell us about that.
So the Wayfarer's Walk was actually designated as a track in 1992. In its current day form as a trail, as a national trail, it's 70 miles long, but it actually follows many hilltop, or rather hill crest, ancient tracks that used to exist for thousands of years before.
And then we've got this one which comes up very close to our unfinished hill fort, and it actually cuts a feature called the boundary ditch. Remember that for later.
So behind me here you can see a bell barrow, but looking at old maps there used to be a saucer barrow right here in front of it as well.
This is where they are in relation to the unfinished hill fort, adjacent to our ancient ridgeway track. You can just make out the ploughed out saucer barrow in this aerial shot. Within the hill fort itself, a disc barrow has been identified, but you can't really see it now. However, you definitely can see this fine high status disc barrow, Bronze Age, to the north of the fort. And then over here, again, close to our ridgeway, we've got these two sub-rectangular enclosures, likely late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, predating the fort.
We've got two boundary ditches, including this one. This is the western one, and it runs up the crest of the escarpment here, all the way down to a feature called the Seven Barrows, down near the A34. There's another ditch over to the east as well, which is fairly faint, but you need to remember this western one. It's important. Both these ditches predate our hill fort. And then we've got this. It is a dew pond, almost certainly clay-lined, probably prehistoric. It probably predates the hill fort. So, again, that sort of ranch idea, Bronze Age ranch. This was for watering the cattle. Hedley, what are you doing in that bush?
This is where Tweedy Outdoors sat and had his Gevrey Chambertin. I'm recreating it. He saw a dead rat just here.
We can see the unfinished hill fort on Ladle Hill was sited in a landscape that had been lived and died in for centuries, with clear evidence of farming. Most important of all in terms of what we're going to learn about building a hill fort is that western ditch. Remember it. Never excavated, going by the characteristics of the camp here, the best guess is that it is dated to any time between the 4th to 1st centuries BC. There are a couple of other features. The suggestion of huts on the northern slope, possibly an encampment for the builders of the fort, and then down the bottom of the hill, this feature. Now considered to be a Roman fish pond or, ridiculously, a chariot racing arena. But I think it's a catchment feature, a fish pond, a water catchment feature for the planned fort. So there.
Darren, in your earlier videos, you had that time-travelling bangle thing. Yeah, that.
Absolutely.
Why did you stop using that?
Well, it is fantastic, Headley. You can literally go anywhere in time and space with this, but it's just way too dangerous. It is fantastic, Headley. You can literally go anywhere in time and space with this. Up until the 1930s, this confusing mess of a hill fort caused great confusion in the minds of antiquarians. A Dr. Williams Freeman, or possibly Freeman Williams, it doesn't matter, he thought that what we were looking at was a hill fort that had been finished and had subsequently been damaged by later farming attempts to improve the land. But he was wrong about that. So I'll just do this to show you how deep they did get the ditch in places and how high they did get the bank. So it was in 1930 that Stuart Piggott made his discovery. He got hold of an RAF aerial photograph, basically, and that's where he stumbled on the truth of this place. So I'm going to go up and sit on this spoil heap. This is one of the spoil heaps. Next to this conveniently placed GoPro. And so before he got his hands on this aerial photograph, Piggott Smith had come up with the idea that this was a Neolithic causewayed enclosure that had later been adapted to a hill fort. Once he saw that picture, he knew he was wrong about that. That was how he worked out that what we were looking at was a hill fort that had been started and never finished.
He worked up here with OGS Crawford to determine what the construction process had been. I love this evocative opening to his subsequent report. Every archaeologist has at one time or another no doubt idly toyed with the attractive, if utterly impractical, idea of travelling backwards in time, and has seen himself arrived within his period, solving many problems by merely looking around him. Students of earthworks would give much to have been present at the building of a hill fort, for even if conversation with the builders were impossible, a great deal might be learnt by watching the work in progress. Time travel was now real, presenting me with the ideal opportunity as well to pretend to be Doctor Who again.
Let's time travel.
Please be careful with that, Headley.
Step 1. Choose your site. Defendable, good viewpoint, existing useful features. In this case, that's that western ditch and possibly the dew pond. Step 2, mark out your ditch. Now, Headley's walking up that pre-existing ditch on the western side, and I thought it would be a good idea for him to show you what happened here. He's running the length of where it was used as the western and northern ditches for the new hill fort.
It's around about here, I think.
Of course, I could have just done it like this, but it wouldn't have been so much fun.
We'll let poor Headley have a bit of a rest after that. He's over there playing with his Arthur. So we've got to the point now where they couldn't utilise that existing boundary ditch. And what I'm walking down into is effectively a setting out trench. So because the hill fort wasn't finished, we get to see this. We wouldn't normally see this. This is effectively the narrow ditch that they dug to mark out the planned curvature of the rest of the hill fort. I walk up this bit of rampart that they did build. You could see the clear berm behind me that they didn't. So what they did was they moved the first excavated material from the ditch out a little way, 30, 40 feet in old money, out into the centre of the hill fort. And you could see these spoil heaps out here just waiting to be collected and used. And of course, that never happened. So one of the things we've learnt by being able to go back in time and look at an unfinished hill fort is that they didn't want to use that first material. They wanted the larger chunks of chalk that were further down to form the firm base for the rampart. And then that stuff would go back on top.
So what we got here is a ditch on the left, a ditch on the right, and a kind of an entrance in the middle where they probably would have been trying to get the topsoil into the hill fort to be used later on. I can't believe he had me running up a hill in this heavy rucksack. So there are places where there are no ramparts, but then in the places where the ramparts are most developed, there was a height differential from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the rampart of about 12 feet.
Work stopped here before there could be any more steps, which is probably a good thing as far as Headley is concerned. We've got ramparts in places and not in others. The spoil heaps were left with their tadpole tails. No sign of guardhouses at either the western or eastern entrances, and no timber palisade, which would have been step 7.
Headley, I'm just going to nip over into the hill fort to do some talky bits while you finish off with the drone here.
Yep.
You won't have it chase me, will you?
No. I'm just getting the last shots because we're losing the sun. It's
Great.
fine.
OK, I'll catch up with you in a bit.
Okay. Let's get him. Let's get this geography teacher.
Stupid!
Run, geography teacher, run! I'm going to do it. I will get him. He knows it.
I'm a bit singed, but I'm okay. I will be avenged, by the way. We know something of the old name for Ladle Hill. We've got 2 charters. This one is from 931 AD, and that means the highway leading to the camp of the pond. And then we've got this one from 943 AD, and that means then so to the camp of the pond, westward to the ditch.
So tell me, Headley, where are we now?
We're currently on Watership Down in the Hampshire Downs, you know, from the book.
Yes, absolutely. Richard Adams. I imagine you've got some sort of overlay for us?
Yeah, here you go.
Look at that. An absolutely beautiful place. So it is owned by the evil genius, Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber, isn't it? Is that right?
I quite like his music, but yes, it is, yes.
And what did you make of the book and, of course, the notoriously scary film of Watership?
Well, I only have to hear Bright Eyes by Simon & Garfunkel, and
That
it
is
scares the
terrifying.
bejesus out of me, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yes, and they wouldn't show that film now, would they?
No.
They wouldn't make a film like that. I think they do still show it, but it's got a warning. Is it a PG certificate?
It's got to be at least a PG, I think.
Kids nowadays, we were hard as kids in the 70s. We were well hard.
You should see the slides that we used.
Bright eyes, burning like fire. Bright eyes, how can you close and fail? How can the light that burns so brightly suddenly burn so pale? Bright eyes.
Can you hear that absolutely horrendous noise?
No?
So, Darren, why do you think Ladle Hill was an unfinished hill fort?
Well, there are probably 2 key ideas that people have. One is that across the other side of the valley, we have the Beacon Hill fort. So some people think that they decided that they preferred that one. And I think you've got a view on that, Headley, haven't you?
Well, yeah, but the thing is with the Beacon Hill fort, it's probably around 1,000 or even more than 1,000 years before Ladle Hill. So we're looking at potentially up to 1,000 BC. So I don't see that as really that sticks. Why would they go to all this effort if they could just use that one anyway?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think the more likely scenario, it is a little bit fanciful and antiquarian-ish, but there is a view that if this hill fort was actually being built in the 1st century BC, now, we know at that time that a Belgic tribe, the Atrebates, came over, and we see at other hill forts a sort of frantic refortification going on. So some think that they started building this hill fort here in response to this perceived threat. Now, if that is the case, we obviously don't know why they stopped. Perhaps the threat didn't turn out to be what they thought it was, or perhaps it did. Well, that was great, Headley. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed it, apart from the bit where you menaced me with that drone, of course.
Yeah, but that was only retaliation because you got me running up a hill fort.
Excuse me 1 second, Headley. Can literally go anywhere in time and space with this.
Anywhere in time and space? No, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this. Oh, no, get me out of here. Get me out of here. I blame Paul Whitewick. He persuaded me.
Ah, perfect, Tweedy. He's taken the bait.
So, Agent WC-21, the thorn in our sides has been removed. You have done well.
So with Paul Whitewick blown up, I've blown him up, I've sent Headley into the time tunnel. Wessex ways can now be ours.